Guys, after having served as a U.S. Air Force SERE Specialist and not only training those who are high risk of isolation, but also helping develop other trainers, as well as serving as a coach of those who are working through the pipelines themselves, just going through the training to become someone who is a military trainer. I have witnessed that there are a few core characteristics and attributes that, when cultivated, produce excellence rather than mediocrity. A few virtues that, when held up above all, they really help produce the best and most outstanding characters. I believe these same virtues is what set apart good from the great and those who are interested in protecting themselves and others. So in this video, we're going to look at the few core characteristics or traits that really set others apart, how we can cultivate them, some stories from a little bit of military background. All right, guys, let's get into it. All right, guys, so what are they? First, let's just list them out, okay? Humility comes first, and then you have integrity, which is a must-have. Discipline, of course. And the last one is the relentless pursuit of excellence. So let's hit it one by one. First of all, humility. Guys, without humility, you don't have a good operator. You don't have a good teammate. You don't have a good leader. And as an example, there was one guy who actually went through all of his training as a senior enlisted personnel. He was actually a technical sergeant whenever he went through the baseline training. He had actually had other experience within the military construct and then came in as a complete newbie and novice. But even though that is a challenge for a lot of guys' ego and character, this particular gentleman was just excelled at taking the lowest rung, not assuming that he was any higher than he was. He always assumed that he was a complete beginner, and as such, he really, really excelled. Not only in training, but I also had the privilege of witnessing him rise to great heights very, very quickly. As soon as he finished tech school, he was put in more and greater leadership positions, and as such, he really, really excelled. And then he had to go back in the pipeline, and it's completely different because he had to take some training that he had missed before in his pipeline. And even as a tech sergeant, even in a place of positional authority where he was over charge of many men, he had to go back to the position of being a trainee, which in the military is a completely different mindset. And I myself had to have a similar route in my training where I had missed some training in the pipeline. And then I had to go through the paces and was in a position where I was now training and developing other trainers. And then I had to go back, and whenever I did, myself and another friend with me who was in the same spot, we were really not looking forward to going back to the role of being a trainee, where it's we don't care about your ideas, it's shut up and color. This is the military, and you have to now do all the things and not have any questions or come up with your own brilliant ideas, which at the time we were very good at because we were in leadership roles, and so it was really different kind of mindset. But as we were starting to go through that, we were told of this other guy who had just gone through the same training, very similar position, and he was actually higher ranking than me and my friend. He had more leadership, more responsibilities. But whenever he came through that training, he again assumed to put on the hat of a newbie, just did not elevate his position. As such, he really, really excelled, and he just put his nose down, got to work, did the things, and was a great example to the other guys who actually were newbies and actually had to go do the things, and their correct position was shut up and color. So he was an inspiration to him, and he was a good inspiration to me and my friend, who then decided to take the same course of action, and it worked out really well. But humility definitely ruled the day for him. It worked beautifully. In contrast, there's another individual whose name I will not mention, but he went through and he had life experience, but he had no position, no rank, no military experience. And whenever he came through, even though he was a little bit older than standard, he was the very beginning rank, airman basic. You cannot get any lower than that in the U.S. Air Force. And he still had this one superpower, this one thing that he was really, really good at. That was really just ticking off his superiors. Anybody who was in leadership position over him just had great excuses to not like this guy, and he made them up. For his peers, they seemed to get along with him just fine. But anybody in leadership position, he did not jive with, and even to the point of actually trying to write paperwork and get his superiors in trouble at every level. And even though I have no idea how this guy went through and actually passed selection, not long after his tech school training, he eventually, through interesting circumstances, is no longer in the military. So, case in point there, whenever you really want to excel, humility is a huge asset, and pride will blind you to your own shortcomings, and it is a huge downfall. So, have to start with humility. If you don't have that, that's foundational, it's fundamental. If you don't have that, you're not going to go very far. Integrity is next, and integrity really means that unlike humility, unlike courage, where there are degrees, you can be mostly brave, you can be mostly humble, and still have some shortcomings. Integrity is one of those attributes where you really, really have it, or you really, really don't. There's not that much leeway. It's mostly on or off, and integrity really means taking the hard right over the easy wrong. It is being truthful, being straightforward, being honest with yourself, with other people. And it's the foundation for trust. So if you don't have integrity, then you basically have very artificial relationships. It can't run very deep. But with integrity, then you actually can have relationships and connections with people as deep as your character runs. So integrity was the next thing that we really, really look at. And there's a lot of opportunities to cut corners. There's a lot of chances to try to paint yourself in a better light than you should in training in the military. However, those that were honest with themselves and with others and withheld that standard with good integrity, those are the guys that you really want to have on your team or in a leadership position. Now, the next one is discipline. And discipline is something that, shout out to Jocko, Willink, probably one of the most famous for inside the military community, is always focusing and talking about different aspects of discipline. Guys, if you have not read Extreme Ownership, I highly recommend, encourage, stop everything, full stop. The very next book that you listen to or read should be Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. There's a lot of great books that he's written, but in that, he talks about discipline equals freedom. And as a protector, someone who stands in the gap, if you do not have discipline to be able to keep your training regimen, if you do not have discipline to maintain your skills or to pursue more and higher and greater, what happens is the result is either stagnation or a downgrade of your skills, because everything that we practice, everything that we do, martial skills are perishable skills. There's no set it and forget it. You must always be improving. You must always be maintaining, and that requires a level of discipline. So it is something that is absolutely essential. For myself, I found myself going through military training. I was almost always, at least through training, I was always the first guy to get up in the morning. And the reason is that I was not born with some kind of freakish skills of being able to jump up last minute, throw my clothes on, and bolt out the door. I would just, that was not me. So I needed to have usually a good solid 45 minutes to an hour before showtime. There, I would be up before anybody else, and I would have the opportunity then to collect myself, get my mindset right, stretch out, have coffee, whatever I needed to do, whenever that was afforded. Even whenever I'd have to go out in the field, and I'd have to actually make my fire and boil the water and then make the coffee the old-fashioned way. That was worth it to me because I needed to have that time, and I knew where my own limitations were. And so for me, giving up that sleep to be able to have extra time and enforce that was the easiest way for me to be able to really excel and get my head screwed on right for that day. So John Maxwell talks about the principle that if you want to get further ahead, you need to start early. And that applies to life and also applies to your day. One great hack to being able to excel in each and every day is to get up earlier than everybody else. That way you can accomplish good things, you can make your bed, you can get your workout in, you can do whatever you need to do to be able to already have something accomplished by the time you get to your main battles. And so this is another core discipline. The core attribute is discipline. Without that, guys, things fall apart. And if you're hit and miss, and it usually ends up into mostly miss, and then it's a downward spiral from there. The last one is relentless pursuit of excellence, because excellence is a very difficult thing to attain. And usually it's not the guys that are the most talented or the natural athlete or the dude who just excels at everything first out of the get-go that is the best in the long run, because usually those guys will get to an acceptable degree of performance, and then they call it good and they move on to their next interest, as opposed to some of those guys that really are on the struggle bus and they have a difficult time mastering each skill, but they stick with it and they keep grinding and they keep working and they work through all of their problem sets until eventually they've arrived at a degree of mastery, usually far and above those guys that have a natural take to it. So really didn't give much stock to guys going through that have a natural ability, or maybe they were the fittest, or whatever it was. Really what the focus was is to try to find those guys that were relentless in their pursuit of excellence. And if you had somebody who had a teachable character, they had the humility, they had integrity, and they had discipline, coupled with that relentless pursuit, you had a winning formula. You guys, that's the same thing that we need to model as we stand in the gap. Something about our industry in particular, whenever you are actually trying to protect others, whenever you're trying to survive and be able to be rise to the occasion in the most desperate moments in life, these are the things that build up for that success. And really, for me, I've always taken these things as seriously as I possibly can, because from my own perspective, in the defense industry, if you don't take it seriously, if you aren't at the tip of the spear, if you aren't trying to understand the most cutting edge tactics and techniques and procedures, then really you're going to become dull. And whenever you need to be sharp, that is whenever basically your lack of consistency, discipline, and relentless pursuit of excellence, that lack will create a gap in which there is going to be a failure zone. And whenever you're talking about defending others, now we're talking about a needless loss of life. So in my philosophy, halfway is worse than none at all. Part of the reason why I'm in the industry that I am is because I really believe that there are going to be people that we can impact that if we were not here would not be impacted. And what galls me, what really sticks in my craw, some of those people who get into the industry for their own ego, not because they have skills or passion or desire to help and protect others, but because they think it's cool. And whenever other people see them looking cool, they're like, really strokes their ego. And the downside here to that is that really what ends up happening is that those characters are not tip of the spear, and they are not very good at what they do. And as such, they end up teaching good people who are investing their time, investing their energy, investing their money with subpar skills and subpar tactics and not cutting edge aspects to be able to improve themselves and do the most that they can to stand in the gap and protect others. What that leads to is failure. And whenever we're talking about failure in this context, we're talking about a needless loss of life. So for me, I can't have any compromise. Same thing with our instructor staff. That's really where I think matters the most. But for you as a protector, for you who are willing to stand in the gap for others, I want you to try to understand this aspect of the relentless pursuit of excellence. Let's say on the moment when, remember, we don't get to choose the moment will choose us, as Travis Haley says, but we need to think, when that moment comes, all right, what a shame it would be to find us unprepared. Let's say the person or the thing that you care about, the ideal or the family member or the friend that you care most for, and remember, protection has always been more about others than yourself. If their outcome were determined on your prior performance and discipline, if they were to somehow actually lose their lives and you were unable to protect them, could you live with yourself if you did not do everything that you possibly could up to that point and then put your trust in God? All right, that's the word that I wanted to share with you guys today. there are a few core attributes that matter way more than natural ability, way more than your current skill level, and they are at the root. They are your character, all right? And these traits, these virtues, really distinguish the people from mediocre to truly outstanding, all right? Look around you. Who do you want to be? And who do you want to associate with? That's the thing that I want to leave you guys with. All right, guys. Let me know what other character traits you guys think are important, and try to look in the mirror. I'm not suggesting that you post it, but try to have a hard look in the mirror and give yourself a rating, 1 out of 10, on each of those different aspects. And let me know what things you think are equally important, or maybe more important, or also things to consider in terms of your character traits and your own personal aspects of virtue. All right, guys, that's it for today. God bless. See you later. Stand ready. Be prepared.